my father-in-law's death, and so we did a mass at in San Francisco and for the memorial, and then we went out to his favorite dim sum restaurant afterwards, which he always went to. Every time he showed up in San Francisco, he'd go directly from the airport to this dim sum restaurant, and so we gorged ourselves. But while I was there, I have a 16-month-old son, and he woke me up at 5:45 on Sunday morning, and I packed him up in the stroller so that we didn't wake up everyone in the house. And we went down to the local coffee shop, and I was sitting there, and as we were kind of going through San Francisco, I was remembering, I lived in Detroit before I was here in Sacramento, and then I lived for 4 years in San Francisco. And at 6:15 in the morning, it really felt like that city that I left. It really felt like San Francisco, and the fog was there, and you're wandering around, and at 6:15 in the morning in San Francisco, it's an interesting group of characters that are out. It's like, it's the old guys, right? All the old guys are up, and they've been woken up. They're out getting their cup of coffee. There's the people who are getting off the night shift. There's some people who are getting off some other shift who have been up all night long. I'm not sure what exactly they were doing, but I think they look not quite as good as they looked at 9:15 earlier in the evening. But one of the things about it is at 6:15, a lot of the shops are closed. And, for me, what is different about that city at 6:15 is it doesn't feel like what it is in many ways, what it feels like to me now, which is just, one boutique store after another. That so many of the people that made that city interesting to me, and so many of the people that I worked with when I was running a street outreach program, are gone, right? Mm-hmm. So many of those people are gone in that city. It's not the city that I left 9 years ago because they've been priced out. It is, a city of boutique stores. It's not a city as diverse, as interesting, and as dynamic as it once was. And it's one of the things that I love about Sacramento, is that Sacramento is that dynamic place in many ways still, right? I mean, there is a little bit of everybody, a little piece of the world that so many people have brought to them, to Sacramento, to this region, all over, that they, it is in many ways one of the most, if not the most diverse city, and that spreads out all across this region. And I think about that every time I go down. When I'm in town, I don't miss the Sunday farmers market, and I think you just get a sense of what a dynamic place that we all live in. I also spend a lot of time in the river, and I walk my dog down there. I don't think there are any police officers there or county park rangers, but I don't put them on a leash. You get to meet all. I think there's this guy Adam that I see all the time down there, and he teaches yoga to senior citizens, and sort of what he does. It's just like the odd characters you meet. I met this guy down there for a while who was, he had the ankle bracelet on. He just got out of prison, and you get the sense of the diversity of this place, but also some of its challenges. Walking down along the river, and this is a place driven by the confluence of two great rivers of California. And as I think about Sacramento, I think this is, housing is such a critical piece of how this works. It's the largest expense that almost all of us pay in our lives is, that rent payment or that mortgage payment. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking to you. You all know how important it is. I think that you're here today, and that says quite a bit. Maybe something about your sanity, but you're just going to spend a whole day talking about this issue. And the costs here aren't as high as they are in a place like San Francisco, but I think they're high enough that they're distressing, many families. It's really having an impact on what it means to live in this place. Daryl talked about the sort of change from 2000 to today in costs of rent. But what you've really seen in the last 3 years is a pretty dramatic increase. They went up during kind of leading up into 2008, and then prices dropped again. In the last 3 years, they've gone up about 26%. So, 2012, an average two-bedroom apartment was $900. Today, it's $1,133 is the average for a two-bedroom apartment in the city of Sacramento, and I think that is reflective of kind of what's going on all across this region. Certainly worse in Davis than it is here. And so, I think Daryl laid out, I won't go through the sort of cuts to other programs at the same time that all of that happened, but those are the things that are going on. And I don't know about all of you, but I don't have an extra like $233 each month that I want to be putting in what my rent costs. And I think for many people, that's just it's a hardship that they really can't put up with, and that have real impact on their lives. I started to think about this. It's like when you get done paying your rent, you ought to have enough money left that you can live a decent life. That's what affordability means to me. There's lots of different ways to think about it, but that's how I think about it. And I think, there are a lot of things that we can do locally, but I also want to put this in context. Like this, the reason that housing costs are going up in California it's not an accident. It's not actually just driven by the market. In California, they talk about tax-related expenditures. That's both money that goes out and tax breaks that we give away. In California, we give out approximately $7.7 billion in tax-related expenditures, primarily to wealthy people around their housing. So the mortgage interest deduction, which primarily benefits higher income people. We give people exemptions on capital gains taxes when they sell their houses. So we spend, maybe about $500 to $700 million subsidizing the housing for lower income people. We spend $7.7 billion subsidizing the housing costs of higher income people. And then on a federal level, that's magnified. Basically, what we've done is we've created a system which rewards people for speculating on real estate. We reward Wall Street companies, we reward foreign investment funds, and we reward all of us for speculating in different ways on real estate. And I think that in some ways we need to tackle that underlying system, but it's not just an accident that we got where we are in California. But there are also things that we can do at the local level, and I, now working on state level issues, get to see what other communities are doing. One of the biggest things is they focused on housing trust fund campaigns, try and develop revenue at the local level to build affordable development, to support the federal funds and some of the state funds that are out there. Boomerang fund campaigns. When redevelopment went away, not all that money disappeared, right? It is coming back into cities and into counties as they are getting back the property tax. A big chunk of that property tax money that's coming into cities and counties ought to go back into what it was doing in redevelopment, which is paying for affordable development, making sure that people have homes. Commercial linkage fees. So when new commercial development happens, if there's a small fee on those per square foot. The other things that are going on too, though, is that people are paying a lot more attention to tenant protection. As the real estate market picks up, a lot more people are getting evicted. So people are looking at what can we do to prevent people from getting kicked out of the places where they already live. Condo conversion ordinances, certainly in places like the Bay Area. And for those of you who weren't paying attention, Richmond passed what is the first rent control ordinance in a long time that has been passed in California. So there are a lot of different tools that are available at the local level. I was listening on the radio on the way in, and Oakland is just having a hearing in Oakland talking about the housing crisis there. So there's just a lot of different tools that I think as you go through today, you ought to be thinking about what can we do in our communities in the region to be addressing this issue. And, Housing California, we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we talk about this, how do we talk about housing as its role. And I've become really convinced that there's no good way to talk about what housing means as a whole. It's just too big of an issue. It's not an issue on its own, right? It's a tool that impacts so many different pieces of what we work on, whether that's health, whether that's climate change, there's not a good way to talk about it as a whole, but there's lots of good ways to talk about it in its specificity. I was out, a friend of mine is the lead psychiatrist at New Folsom Prison, and he runs the psychiatric unit there. And I went out and I did a tour with him, and that's the highest level psychiatric unit in our prison system in California. And walked through, they were running classes and group classes. And the most disturbing group classes, people were basically in phone booth sized cages, right? There are 5 people in the room, people who are so violent that they can't even sit in a room together with one another. They get let in there in shackles and put in and somehow have group therapy in that sort of setting. Which, I don't know, didn't seem like the finest place to be. So I was talking to their discharge planner, and I said, so what do you work on? She said, well, we used to have somebody who helped out with housing. We don't have anybody anymore. I do primary public benefit stuff and getting people ready to go out and leave here. I said, so is homelessness a problem? She said, oh yeah, homelessness is a real problem for our folks. I said, how many people do you think are end up homeless? And she said, I don't really know. I said, well, can you ballpark it for me? She said, well, it's at least over half. And, I've been doing this for a while, but I couldn't help but think, like, we are discharging the most mentally ill, the most violent, people who have the most violent histories out of our highest level facility into homelessness. And I thought, I don't know, just seems like a bad idea. It seems like we ought to do something about that. So I think having a stable home it's critical for health, right? It's critical for, if you're like me, you have a kid under the age of 5, like that moment in a family's life, it's really hard. And being able to go to the same place every night and not have to worry about that, it helps you be a better father. It helps you to raise your child. Homelessness is one of those areas. I think it's pretty obvious, right? Like, for those folks, having a stable home really matters, but it also matters because it saves us money as a community to solve that problem. It's critical for young students, who are being forced to move from place to place. So, that really diminishes their chances of getting a good education if they're moving every time they get evicted. That was a story for my cousin. Why he lived with us a lot of his childhood, because his mom basically stayed in a place for 4 or 5 months. She'd get behind on her rent, she'd get evicted, and he'd come to live with us. That's a critical place for us to think about housing. You all are here today because we need a better plan to deal with the range of different housing needs that we have in the community, and that we need a campaign, right? We need to fight for it. We need to, I think Bill Cerny is balancing a lot of things, and I think we need to tell him, where the weight needs to be on those scales, and that weight needs to be around a little bit more economic justice and a little bit more housing. Thank you.